There's one thing that you have to do if you want to play advanced pickleball, and that's hit consistent, unattackable dinks. At this point, I've played hundreds of matches against players in the 4-5 to 5-5 range, and I found that the team that puts more dinks in play almost always wins. So if you want consistent, unattackable dinks, this video is for you. I've assembled 20 dinking pro tips from the masters for you to try out the next time you play a game. We'll walk through each tip, explain why they could work, and show you how to add it to your game. I guarantee you that at least one of these tips will massively improve your dinks. But first, 20 tips is a lot. What's the logic behind these tips? Well, there's a progression to developing dinks. First, you need to understand the fundamentals. This applies to players from beginner all the way to pro. I revisit the fundamentals often because without a strong foundation, you can't try more advanced strategies. Next, you need to build on your fundamentals and add more abilities like spin, placement, and depth. These abilities will let you deduce and respond to more advanced dinking strategies. And finally, shot selection. With a complete arsenal of dinks, you can start going beyond technique to tactics, knowing the right dink to hit at the right time in every scenario. So these tips are organized into these three categories and go from fundamentals to advanced. There's tips in here for players of all levels, so make sure you watch till the end.
So this is where our net comes into play. Like I said before, rather than a hit, we want to start to think about a catch and a throw. And the net is going to take care of the catch portion for us. Specifically, what we're going to do is we're going to take that net, we're going to keep it slightly out in front of our body, and as the ball is coming, we're going to try to catch each ball. Our goal here is to get that net to the spot of the catch early before the ball gets there, and have it still and waiting for the ball. I call this beating the ball to the spot.
John uses a butterfly net to illustrate that the dink isn't a big swing, you're catching the ball. From that starting point, you can start to build up your follow through. So try that out. Chances are your backswing is bigger than it needs to be. What happens if you eliminate it completely, catch the ball, and then push it forward on your dink, rather than go for a whole swing?
Number 2, your contact point is out in front. And number 3, you're not lifting your paddle or shifting your wrist up like this. No wrist flips.
What Callie is saying is you want to contact the ball in front of you rather than behind you or to the side of you. Combine that with John's tip on catching it like a butterfly net, and what you're doing is you're catching the ball in front of you and then pushing it. Try that out. When you're hitting dinks, notice where you're contacting it. Is it more in front of you, or is it more to the side of you or behind you?
Next time you're dinking, next time you're practicing your dinks, warming up your dinks, I want you to think of something that I call the dink ceiling. And basically what it is we're gonna pretend like there's an invisible plane that goes along the top of the net so that it extends across the top of the net cord. And we're not gonna let our paddle break that invisible plane when we're dinking. Really, the goal of this is to start to train ourselves and get a feel for how little of a movement it actually takes to get a dink up and over the net.
What John's focusing on here is your follow through. He's saying when you're pushing through on your dink, keep it low, below this invisible ceiling that he's talking about. And what he's really trying to help you correct is a lot of players hit way through their dink like a stroke. And all three of these tips, the first one about catching it, the second one about hitting it in front of you, and now this third one about the ceiling, is about making your dink a small compact stroke. There's no backswing because you're catching it out in front of you. And your follow through is as small as possible because you can't break the dink ceiling. Actually, Zane Navratil has a trick that you can try in drilling that helps you accomplish all of these things.
We're gonna shove this ball right in our armpit and we're gonna have ourselves a dink rally. This prevents us from reaching out too far or following through too far. If we follow through too far, we leave ourselves vulnerable to being attacked.
When Zane puts a pickleball in his armpit, he can't reach his arm out and hit it to the side. He has to hit it closer to his body out in front. And he can't take a big backswing because the ball's gonna come out. And he can't take a huge follow through because the ball's gonna come out too. So try that out. It's actually goofy, but it actually works. I remember doing this in tennis too, to try to keep your elbow in.
Not to hold your grip, the grip pressure so tightly on your paddle, not to hold your paddle too tightly, because that will also help the ball go further or lift up.
This is a huge tip to soften your grip. It works on anything that's a feel shot in pickleball, whether it's a drop or a dink. But on a dink, it's especially important. By softening your grip, I don't actually know why it works. It just works, trust me. Zane Navratil has another trick that you can try when you drill.
What I've come up with is one way of fixing a lot of these different issues. And so what we're gonna do is we're gonna take our non-dominant hand, put our finger up, and we're gonna put it at a 90-degree angle where the grip meets the paddle. And now we're going to dink like this. This is going to feel extremely weird at first, but it fixes all of the common dinking problems. When I do this, I can't use my wrist. When I do this, it forces me to get underneath the level of the ball. I can't take a big backswing, right? So this is a great way of limiting motion in our dink shot.
Like the pickleball in the armpit, this actually works. So go out and try it. You'll feel weird because of how small it forces you to make your swing. And I especially think this is useful when you're hitting backhands. The most common mistake people make hitting backhand dinks is breaking their wrist and hitting it to their side like a slice. And this makes it a lot more difficult to do that.
Here's a tip to keep your dinks down. Something that I've noticed that makes me pop the dinks up are when I lift up as I'm hitting. Sometimes I'm trying to cover too much ground and I'm trying to hit and then move on to the next shot. So I noticed that when I stay down through my shot, hit it, keep staying down, and then recover for the next ball, my ball stays lower on the dink. Here's my tip.
This is another great tip from Callie. By keeping your chest down all throughout the dink, you're able to maintain more control over your dink. It actually works really well for drops too. It was one of the main things that fixed my drops.
Another really good tip to get more accuracy on your dinks is to pretend like you're drawing a line to your target with your paddle. So if I'm hitting the Kennedy's backhand directly in front of me, I'm just gonna extend my paddle straight towards my target. I don't wanna pull off of it like this. I wanna finish my dink with my paddle facing right where I want to hit it. So you see I'm going straight towards my target, and because of that, I'm able to be pretty accurate.
This is a great tip on your follow through. We know it should be small and compact. Showing how you're pushing in a straight line to your target rounds out what we need to know about the dink follow through. When you're trying to pick a spot to hit it, try just drawing a straight line with your follow through right to your target.
As far as dink footwork goes, most of the time you'll be shuffling along the line here. So they call it the crab walk. So it's kind of a side step or a side shuffle. So I'll be moving forehand this side, backhand this side. You will also see people, you'll also see a step back every once in a while. That's just a decision you'll make previously. Instead of taking it out of the air, I may step back a little bit to push the dink a little further to get myself in better position and also to be moving forward into the court. If I do step back though, I want to make sure I'm not off my back foot. I want to make sure I'm stable here and then pushing back forward to come back up to the line and look to be more aggressive.
That's a great overview of the type of footwork you should have when you're dinking. So when you're dinking next time, notice your feet. Are you crab walking? And if you have to take a step back, getting set and then moving forward through the dink again, or are you sort of scrambling to get to the dink every time?
The ability to side step, okay? So let's do that a couple times. Side step. So I get it, we're talking footwork to start, right? We're not talking about anything with my arms, I'm not talking about anything with my wrists, I'm talking footwork. Side step, side step, side step.
When you're moving left to right, you're planting one foot and then sidestepping to put your body into a position where you can follow all of the other tips that we talked about. Hitting the ball out in front, having a small follow through, and having no backswing. So that's all the beginner technique that we need to know. Let's move on to more advanced techniques.
And as much as it pains me, I've attempted to purposely demonstrate the wrong way to do it. You can see in these dinks that I'm hitting, I'm reacting quickly, and then I'm not slowing down, I'm not getting set, I'm not hesitating, I'm not pausing. It's just one constant movement from my initial reaction all the way through the execution. So in this next set, I'm going to go back to doing it correctly. The main difference you'll see here is I'm still reacting quickly, but as I'm getting to the spot, I'm trying to slow down or get myself paused before I hit the shot.
This tip is so key and something that advanced players will all do and figure out eventually, but beginner and intermediate players tend not to. See if you can pause before you make contact with the ball. This kind of forces you to do everything right because you're catching the ball and you're forcing your feet to get set. So see if you can do that the next time you're hitting dinks. Try to create a pause before every time you hit the ball.
Slice or underspin dinks. All right, you may have seen lots of players hitting slice, and the benefit of hitting slice or underspin is that the ball stays low and tends to, kind of skip on the ground or not bounce as high. So with slice and underspin, that's really good because, as that ball stays low, it forces a lower contact for your opponent.
Okay, here Briones is talking about adding slice to your dinks. So usually people will just start off with pushing it flat. Now, if you open up your paddle face a little bit and come under it, you can start hitting slice on both sides. And what he's saying is that it makes it more difficult for your opponent because the ball's not bouncing up, it's staying down. So your opponent's gonna have to hit a tougher shot. So try that out. I think with spin, it's really just about trial and error when you're drilling. So see if you can add some slice, see how that feels. Try to maintain all of the other tips that we've talked about so far. You can't really give up any of the fundamentals from the first section. See what kind of spin works for you.
You should try to take any ball out of the air that you can. So a lot of the time, the ball is gonna come right at your feet. What you don't wanna do in that situation is back up and try to take the ball off the bounce.
Now this is really important because especially at beginner and intermediate levels where the players you're playing with aren't hitting consistent dinks that drop in front of you, you're gonna wanna take them out of the air. What doesn't really come naturally is dinking it back over the net instead of attacking it. This is something to really focus on when you're drilling and when you're playing games. Trying to take those dinks out of the air and really hitting dinks, not hitting a volley. Of course, if it's really high and it's attackable, attack it.
Topspin dinks, okay? If you have played any 4-5 or higher level players, you probably have seen them hit with topspin. Now, topspin is, starting low and ending high, and what topspin does, it accelerates the ball forward and it actually dips. Because the ball is traveling in a forward motion, the ball's dipping down to your opponent's feet a lot faster than something like a flat dink. So topspin dinks are very, very useful and they're used by high-level players. And if you can easily hit flat dinks and easily hit slice dinks and you don't have a topspin dink yet, I would really urge you to start practicing it because at a higher level, it's really, really effective.
So topspin dinks are the most difficult dink to learn, and they're the most similar to a more Tennessee stroke. So definitely go out and drill them, try to hit them, but really keep in mind all of the fundamentals that we covered already in this video. Because too often when people start to try to hit topspin dinks, they forget everything. They start taking a huge backswing, they start taking a huge follow through, and then they lose control. It can be a really valuable weapon to add. Those are all of the technique types of tips. Now let's move on to shot selection. Knowing what kind of dink to hit at what time.
We are also looking to use a reset dink when we get pulled out in the outside quadrant. I would say a common tendency with higher level dinking is that we get pulled out of position and we want to look to reset that ball back cross court. If we get pulled wide enough and the ATP is available, you can look to hit you can look to hit the ATP. Okay, Jim, you ready here, buddy? Okay, let's do it. Okay, dinking back and forth. Okay, resetting back in the middle.
This is a really, really important dinking strategy. As you start playing better players, they're gonna have aggressive cross-court dinks. And if you try to keep hitting those cross-court, you're gonna make errors. So you need to learn to reset that point by hitting an unattackable dink back to the middle of the court.
When I feel like I'm in good position, I'm gonna hit it a little bit flatter, and my goal is to hopefully either move my opponent around or push them off of that kitchen line. An offensive dink has a little bit more, is a little bit flatter. It pushes my opponent around just a bit and hopefully is aimed at generating a pop-up from them. Okay, boom. Oh, I missed it.
So that's what People often call it push dink or an offensive dink. When you're in good position and you can hit an unattackable dink that is maybe a little faster, maybe a little deeper, trying to make your opponent uncomfortable, you should be taking those opportunities. So try adding that in when you're drilling your dinks. See what you can get away with in terms of hitting more aggressive dinks.
In general, I think of my cross-court dinks as being my offensive or aggressive dinks, where I'm looking to create opportunities in the point. Straight ahead or playing to the middle as more neutralizing dinks, more maybe setting up my point or getting myself out of trouble. So having said all that, here's what I consider the golden rule for when I'm gonna go cross court versus when I'm gonna play in front of me. So if I'm standing on the kitchen line, my outside foot in this situation would be my right foot because it's closest to the outside of the court. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna draw an imaginary line that comes off my outside foot going straight to the net. If the ball coming to me stays inside that foot, so say we're here, that's inside, I can go wherever I want. I can hit there, I can hit middle, I can go cross court. If the ball crosses that imaginary line and ends up out here, now I'm not gonna play back cross court anymore. I'm gonna play either in front of me or to the middle. So if we have a ball that's outside that line, I'm gonna play there. I'm not gonna try to hit that shot and hook it back across my body cross court.
Yeah, this is an amazing way to think about where you should be targeting your dinks. And as always, it comes from John. He's just great. He has just really great way of articulating strategy in pickleball. This kind of combines the last two tips. Tyson's was about resetting to the middle when you're pulled out wide, and Zane's was about putting pressure on your opponent by hitting aggressive dinks. What John is saying is if that ball is comfortably in front of you, then you can consider hitting an aggressive push dink, maybe cross court. If you're on the receiving end of that, if you're having to hit it outside of you, if you're having to take a big step to get to that ball or even reach with your arm, then you're gonna have to reset that ball down the line or into the middle, because if you try to hit it cross court, that's a low percentage shot. You're not gonna be able to do much with that. The thing you really wanna avoid is making a mistake by missing the ball or popping it up for your opponents to attack.
When I'm dinking defensively, I'm gonna give myself a little bit more height over the net, but I'm also gonna drop this ball a little bit shorter into the kitchen. Because the shorter I can make this ball, the more my opponent needs to hit upwards. So when I'm dinking defensively, I want to make sure that I'm not missing into the net, but I also can't go deep in the kitchen. I'm going to aim for that first half of the kitchen. So this is my more defensive dink. It gives me time to recover back to the center of my box, and it also gives me margin for error over the net.
Zane is adding a little more color on what a defensive resetting dink could look like in terms of depth. When you are pulled out wide and you do have to reset that ball either down the line or in the middle, you're gonna want it to bounce shorter rather than deeper, because when you hit it shorter, your opponent is gonna have a harder time backing it.
Our next tip though is that when you're in a dink battle, you should mix up where you're placing your shots. So what I mean by mixing it up is alternating between different types of dinks and where you're hitting them in the kitchen. So the two ways you can mix it up are by going cross court and down the line, and by going towards your opponent's forehand or towards their backhand. So let me show you how I do that. So rather than just going cross court like this every single time, where I'm aiming for the ball going in the corner, I can actually go to his forehand and his backhand. So if I go more towards the middle, I'm making him hit a backhand. More towards the corner, I'm making him hit a forehand. I can also go down the line, right? So I could literally alternate every single time that I dink and make a different player hit the ball on each one.
This is a really great tip and something you should absolutely be trying to incorporate, but it requires that you're comfortable hitting dinks to all the different targets that we're talking about consistently and unattackably. So this is where the drilling really comes into play. You've got to make sure you've got all of the fundamentals nailed so that you know how to mix up that ball without putting yourself at a disadvantage. But once you do know how to do that, you're going to be making your opponents really uncomfortable because it's going to be harder for them to get into a rhythm, and they're gonna have to be sort of wondering what kind of shot they're gonna be seeing on the next ball, rather than just knowing it's gonna keep going cross court over and over again.
So to be the most effective dinker though, you're gonna wanna make sure you're targeting your opponent's weaknesses. So you have two opponents, but usually both of them are gonna have one dink, whether that be their forehand or backhand dink, that's weaker than the other. Usually it ends up being the backhand. So here I'm going cross court, but what I can do to target his backhand is aim towards the middle more, go for push dinks, which could give me an easier ball that I might want to speed up on. If I'm going down the line, same thing applies. I can simply aim more towards his backhand, which might lure him into giving me an easier ball.
This is just a really smart application of this strategy. Once you have the abilities to mix up your dink targets, you can start to spend more time targeting your opponent's weaknesses. And by targeting their weaknesses, you make them uncomfortable and you earn yourself more opportunities to get their errors or their pop-ups. So hitting dinks well is amazing, but you only get an opportunity to hit dinks if you're getting to the kitchen. So if you're not getting to the kitchen every time, you might want to watch this video that I put together that explains the most essential rules to help you get to the kitchen every time. Watch that video here.